Welcome. And with us today, I have Mariama from New Jersey. Welcome, Mariama. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. I've been watching your stuff on Instagram because you are all about the laws that are being passed in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And even if you don't live in New Jersey, it doesn't matter because where a law is passed somewhere, it is going to trickle. So thank you so much for staying on top of this. And I can't wait to get into this today on what kind of laws they're trying to pass for homeschoolers. So let's just start off the bat with how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
So I am homeschooling my two youngest, and they are 5 and 7.
Okay. So do you have older kids too?
So just at home, I just have those two. So technically, one is school age and one is not. But in New Jersey, you can start as early as 5.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I haven't looked at New Jersey's laws for reporting. I'm in New York, so I'm right over the Hudson
Mhm.
from you. I
Oh,
don't know. Yeah, I think that would be appropriate.
yeah.
I'm like
Mhm.
throwing it out there like I know geography. But yeah, so we are very strict here in New York. And I know that New Jersey fairly recently just passed a law saying that teachers no longer even have to pass like regular literacy tests. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That one, I did hear about that one. I did hear about that one. That one, from what I understand, they're claiming that you do have to have a bachelor's degree, that you're supposed to, like be proficient in literacy. So there's some that are saying that it's not as bad as it sounds.
Okay. And that's the hard part, isn't it? I mean, you want to be informed, but obviously reading the headlines is not enough because you really
Right.
have to get into it. The headlines are going to try to make you think one way and we're like, "Oh, as the homeschooler, I want to share this." And if you don't really read into it, and I did read into it, and I think you're correct too that it was like they did still have to have their bachelor's, they just no longer had to pass this basic literacy exam that
Right.
most other
Because it was like
states
redundant.
yeah,
Yeah.
you do have to pass it in other states. So then it's to the point of like, well, then why take it away? Can they not pass it now? That I don't know. It's been
Mhm.
it's very interesting. A lot of it I have found that has to do with funding, and we as the common folk will just never know the ins and outs. But what even got you into homeschooling in the first place?
Well, in I would say the height of COVID, which was like spring 2020, that's when my oldest was 2 and I just had a newborn. And so for us, it was the first initial thought was we need to protect our kids. It was about their physical safety. I love, watching your channel and listening to your content about health awareness, vaccines. And for us, it was a matter of protecting them. Not for my youngest, could have started preschool. We considered, at the time we were living in Pennsylvania, which also has strict laws. And we were thinking, well, maybe we'll send him to preschool and then maybe we'll start with kindergarten. And when I started talking to teachers in my neighborhood and talking to parents in the neighborhood, they started talking about vaccines and the COVID vaccine being mandatory for all staff and for students. And we started thinking, wait a second, our little one wasn't old enough yet, but we could see where this was going, that at some point they might require him to be vaccinated. And we just felt like that was not an option for us. So we started just doing simple little learning activities at home, hands on learning activities, reading books, lots of nature, time outside. And then I started hearing even more horror stories about families that had been vaccinated. And so I know there's not a debate about vaccinations and stuff, whether you should get vaccinated or not. But for us, it was a matter of protecting our son. We did not want him to have to undergo any kind, for lack of a better term, like a guinea pig experiment. We felt like that just was not an option for us. And that was initially what it was about. And then I started, talking again to more families and teachers because I would go out and we would always meet people in the parks and have conversations with people. And I started hearing about some of the ideologies that were being presented to kindergartners and even preschoolers, like gender ideology and certain things that I felt were just not ever going to align with it just didn't align with our faith. We are Christ followers. And so for us, it was like almost like an awakening. We started to see and hear things from parents that really, it became, I think that's what the best word for it is, an awakening. We started to realize that this is not the public school that we were, coming up under. Like, this experience is totally different. There were certain things that we just were never taught in schools. And my husband and we attended public, private. I even did a magnet school growing up. So I even went to Catholic school. So we had those experiences, and not at any point were we introduced to gender ideology. So that was one of those things for us. It was like, no, this is a no go for us. And so once my son was of age, I believe in Pennsylvania, you can start at 5. When we moved to Jersey, they were already asking, there were teachers in my neighborhood asking me, well, are you going to bring your son here at the age of 5? And I've said, no, we have no intentions. And they recruited heavily. And I said, no. My husband and I said, no, we have no intentions. And so we just continued on the path and haven't looked back. And so now he is 7. We have no intentions of looking backwards. We have no intentions of putting him in a traditional school setting. We actually plan to homeschool our kids through high school.
Awesome. Okay, can I make things uncomfortable for a second here? And
Sure,
that's
good.
just because that's who I am. So I get told, like, not all the time, but, you're just so privileged because, you can homeschool your kids, or you want to shelter your kids. You don't want to expose them to different cultures, or, you want your kid to live in a bubble. You don't want them to know the reality of, say, slavery, anything like that. And I look back at things and I'm like, well, I don't know. When I think about sending my kids to school, it's more about, do you trust the government? Because they're the ones really trickling down the curriculum that our kids are learning. And then I think about, who has our government been worst to? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, there were the Tuskegee experiments, there was slavery. And even, my son goes to a wilderness class where the leader is a Native American guy, and he's like, well, we have to wear masks during COVID. I mean, my son didn't go there during then, but I'm like, since when did you guys start thinking the
Wow.
government was like, had your back? So like, do you ever get those questions? Or like, to me, it seems to me like plain as day. Like,
I get
it's
these questions. I
right.
get
How do
questions all the
you, and I'm trying to
time.
say it in a delicate way, but like, I know where I went to school, I went to an inner city school. And if a Black person was like trying to be smart, they'd be like, why are you trying to be white? And it's like that, what is it? The crabs in the pot, like you try to take down others. I mean, why would any of us trust the government if we know what they've done to us in the past?
It's true. It's absolutely
What's your
true.
response to that?
Believe it or not, believe it or not, and I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but I have been asked by people of African descent, African American relatives, people that, that we used to talk to and no longer talk to. But I've been asked by people, how could you? How could you? I guess, forsake all of the blessings that came from the landmark case Brown v. Board of Education. It's like, how could you? How could you?
We
There's
finally got our kids in
we
school.
finally right, we finally got the freedom to get into these schools, and it's like, no, that's not what our ancestors fought for. They didn't fight for our kids to, be pigeonholed and put in a box. And we dealt with segregation, and then after that it was like, well, now we're in the schools. Yeah, but you're pigeonholed, you're in a box, you're in underperforming schools, they're not educating you. And yes, you have the freedom to go to the school, but what are they actually doing there? They're not educating us. And this is one of the things that I love about homeschooling, because if you look at the stats, African American children and even Latino children outperform their peers in public school. Now, I don't know the exact statistics, and it's never really exact because, in some states there's no reporting required, like in New Jersey, there are no reports required. You don't have to file a letter of intent. You don't have to submit registration assessments, nothing. In New Jersey, there is no oversight. It's one of the 12 states that have no oversight for homeschoolers, so you're not going to get all the stats. But across the nation, African Americans and Latinos outperform their peers in public school, traditional schools. They outperform them on
The
the
ones that are
SATs,
homeschooled?
ACT that are homeschooled, outperform their peers in public and traditional schools. They outperform them on the ACTs, SATs. I believe, let me just double check. I think it's 20, just double check because I had it in front of me. I believe it's 20 to 25 points higher, if I'm not mistaken.
I would bet that they outperform everybody just
They do.
because
Yeah. But that
you
is a stat. That's a stat that let me just double check. Yes. I believe it is, yeah, I believe it's 20 to 25 points higher. That's I think one of the alarming stats that I saw, because when you talk to a lot of people, they'll say, oh, well, but the system has the supports in place, especially for underprivileged communities. And they're usually pointing at people of color. Like, you need to be in the system because they have the supports, and they have, the supports for special needs and the supports that you need for underprivileged communities. And they're usually talking about inner city areas. But the reality is, regardless of socioeconomic background, Black children are still outperforming their traditionally schooled peers, regardless of where they live, how much money their family has, their family size, doesn't matter. They're still outperforming. So when I hear people make that argument, what about Brown v. Board of Education? I'm like, what about it? They fought for the right for us to have the freedom to be educated, to have the best education possible, and it's not the government school system.
And you know what that reminds me of? Because I had a post a long time ago too, where I was like, so many states fought. Like, I grew up where in New York, where you couldn't get married legally if you were gay, right? And then that overturned, and I knew some gay people that got married, and you attend the wedding. And I never really thought about it, but it's like you're fighting so hard to have the right to be married. But what does marriage really do? First of all, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, marriage was between you, your spouse, and the pastor, priest, whatever religion you were, and you wrote it in a Bible, and that's it. The state had nothing to do with it. And then now we're making people fight for the right so that the government can just
Oh,
keep
wow.
track of you.
Okay. I never knew that.
It's like a very similar thing.
Wow.
We're fighting for this right to be in the schools so that they can actually just keep track of us better, so that they
Pretty
can keep
much.
track
Yeah.
of our statistics, keep track of where we are at all day, what we're eating. I mean, it really is. Nobody stops to like step outside and look at what are we fighting for and why. It's like the women's movement too,
Right.
right? Of the 60s. I want to get out and work. Like, really? Because you're still going to have to do laundry when you get home. You still have to feed these people. You still have to clean.
It's
So
true.
why are we fighting to work?
It's true. That's like a whole different,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a whole different topic. It's funny because I used to be I used to be one of those people who's like,
me
I've
too.
got to get out there and I've got to fight for my right to have a voice, to break the glass ceiling. And then I ended up home
Me
because
too.
this was what I was supposed to be fighting for. I was supposed to be fighting for the right to, protect my children, and the right to be a parent, which
Yeah.
is something that the state is trying to literally take from us, is the right to be parents. And it's just sad. It's sad what we're seeing across the nation. But in New Jersey, right now, what we're up against is we're up against four bills. We're up against four bills: Assembly Bill 5825 and Senate Bill 1796. These bills would require New Jersey homeschoolers to file a letter of intent stating that you want to homeschool, but you also have to provide curriculum that aligns with state standards. You're going to have to essentially adopt whatever curriculum is approved by the state and include topics that may go against your faith, which is our religious freedom as Christian parents, and a Christian homeschool is protected under the First Amendment. Our parental rights are protected under the 14th Amendment. But you're saying, you're going to have to do XYZ, which is, again, it's clearly overreach. This is not about accountability. This is about overreach and taking the rights of parents away from them. This is not even about what's best for the children. It's really, like you said, it's about tracking families. File that letter of intent so we can track you, every one of your moves. And then we control what we teach in our traditional schools, right? But now we want to control what you're teaching your kids too. Overreach. That's a big issue here. And then not only do we have those two, we have two identical bills. Don't ask me why they filed two separate bills. They're exactly the same bill, but it's filed two bills, I guess, to make sure that it got passed through. But Assembly Bill 5796 and Senate Bill 4589 are requiring homeschoolers to meet annually with a school district representative for a general health and wellness check. Now, private, public, they don't have to do that. And now it begs the question, are you trying to violate our Fourth Amendment rights? You can't go and, search and inspect a private home without
Like
a search
probable
warrant,
cause.
without probable cause, or without a warrant, right? And so what they're trying to do is get families to meet at a school district or a location where you meet a school district representative. And now they're saying, well, we want you to come here because they know they can't inspect your home without probable cause. And they're making this blanket requirement for all homeschoolers. This is what they want to do. All homeschoolers, regardless of whether you're a good homeschooler or not, there's no evidence that you've done anything wrong, but we want you all to come so that you can meet with our school district representative to do a general health and wellness check. That could be mental health, that could be sexual health, that could be nutritional health. What kind of health are we talking about? Why are you concerned about the health and wellness of my child unless you have evidence that there was abuse or neglect, right? And so you're potentially going against Fourth Amendment rights, and you're also going against my parental rights to take care of my child and to provide care for my child without the state's interference, and the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment, because you're not doing that for private and public schools. They're not
Okay,
required to do
so
that.
dumb it down for us. What's the Fourth Amendment?
So the Fourth Amendment basically says that we are not to have any suspicionless intrusion, right? Or nobody can come into your house and nobody can come and inspect your home and nobody can check on your kids and come and see what's going on without a warrant or without probable cause. So if a mandated reporter, like a pediatrician, you go to the doctor sees your baby and says, oh, we think there's a problem with your baby, that you might have done something wrong, we're going to call ACS in New York, or I think in Jersey, it's called DIFUS. We're going to call DIFUS on you, and we're going to tell them that we think that there's potential here for neglect or abuse.
Okay.
And then they take the case, they open it up, and they start the investigation. Now they can come to your house. They can knock on your door because they have probable cause. There might be abuse or neglect. We have to investigate. But unless there is a case like that, you can't do that.
I have so many things running through my head right now. First of all, I know many teachers here in New York, and my one friend in particular has said, like, I know there is abuse in this home, and there is literally nothing the school can do about it. They will not take the child. I know somebody that works for CPS here in New York, which is called Child Protective Services, and they said, unless we literally watch the parent beat the child, we cannot take the child because of the laws protecting
Yeah.
that parent. And there's nowhere to put the child anyway.
Anyway.
So
Exactly.
this is like, and I get that they are, because I think there's a similar bill federally going, like it's being written, and it's about like the protecting of the child, that abused child, that, that hillbilly that just leaves their kid
Yes.
to work the farm and won't educate them and beats them and doesn't feed them. They're like targeting the heartstrings of people to say that that's
Right.
who homeschools, but
Which is not accurate. Right.
no.
Yeah, it's insane to me. It's insane to me. But believe it or not, there are people that buy into this emotional language, because there are people that still think that homeschoolers look like the homeschoolers from the 1970s, where in some cases they were keeping their kids in the house and they were protecting them, and they didn't go far and they don't go anywhere. Sometimes they never left the property because there were other people that were willing to put their parents in jail, or their parents could potentially go to jail.
Right. Or they beat the child and they didn't want the school to see the bruises, that sort of
Right.
thing. But yes, the majority. Now, and I'm in New York where we have pretty strict laws. So I do have to send a notice of intent every year. I have
Right.
to send something called an IHIP, which is an individualized home instruction plan, saying what I
Yes.
intend to do. And then I send a quarterly report saying what I did do. And it sounds a lot worse than it is. Because, I just go through my pictures and the books I took out of the library. I'm like, yep, we did this, that, and the other thing. And then the school's probably like, well, that's way more than we did in school. So you're good.
Pretty much.
And then at the end of the year, you give a final report, or a couple of the years they need a test or something, or you can pick one or the other. So it's really not that bad, but we do have it as one of the worst. How do you jump from New Jersey with no reporting to
There,
all of
yeah.
a sudden we're going to do some home visits?
Well, believe it or not, and I was researching the homeschool laws in New Jersey. New Jersey enacted they don't even really have technically a homeschool law. They don't even call it homeschool. But in 1967, New Jersey enacted, I think it was a New Jersey statute, section 18A, that said all you have to do is provide equivalent instruction in any place other than school. That's it. You just have to provide equivalent instruction. In the 60s, they determined that homeschooling, met the state's requirements. But then in 2004, proponents of regulations on homeschoolers said, you know what, we want to propose some bills that would mandate content for curriculum and oversight and medical exams. It was never enacted. Never enacted. I guess they didn't get enough votes to pass these bills. And so it's been, 21 years later, and we're living in a very different climate in our country. And there are multiple political leaders that are fighting really hard to get these bills passed. Why now? I'm not really sure. I don't know what it is about this year.
Right.
But we went from, again, 58 years ago, the law was passed that we could, said that we could homeschool. And then, 21 years ago, they tried to attack the families. And now here we are today, they're doing it again. It could have something to do with the pandemic levels and the rates of homeschoolers in the pandemic. The levels went up, they shot up. Prior to pandemic, it was less than 1% of homeschoolers in New Jersey. Post pandemic, 3.7%. That number just keeps rising, right? Because the national rate of homeschooling keeps rising like 2 to 8% annually. So they're probably projecting, in the next 5 to 10 years, that number will be so high that it's going to be a problem, right? Because we
Yeah.
don't have control over these families. Not only that, we're losing these bodies, we're losing money,
Funding. Yeah. Funding.
funding. That's the big one. It's not about accountability and oversight. It is about oversight, but it's not about accountability. It's not about the kids and their welfare. It's just, we need to get a hold of these people, because if they keep growing at this rate, we're not going to have anybody in these schools.
Yeah. And so when you think back to the original reason of why we even have the school set up the way we do with Horace Mann, he went over to Prussia. He saw that they had these
Right.
schools where kids were learning how to be obedient citizens and obedient workers. And he brought it over here to Massachusetts and implemented it there, convinced everybody, hey, let's
Mhm.
do this. And then John Dewey and the Rockefellers really pushed that forward, investing all the
Yes.
money into a modern school system. So we have obedient workers, smart enough to do the job, but not smart enough to question it. If we get too many of us educating our kids on
There
things
you go.
like, the Tuttle Twin stuff, where, hey, you can have your own business, be an entrepreneur, think outside the
Think freely.
box. I can definitely see why that's a threat if it's going up, 2% a year. And like you said, you project in 5, 10 years, they've lost a lot of bodies at that point, and not even,
Exactly.
wow, yeah, like who's going to be in the military then? Who's going to work these governments? I worked in
Right.
government for 16 years. Who else is just going to sit there and
Wow.
push papers in a cubicle? Like at some
Right.
point, you're like, holy crap, there's got to be more to life than this. That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of that, like the exponential growth
Yeah.
of homeschooling. And like you were mentioning earlier, without having the probable cause, like I understand that they want me to send the reports. I'm not even mad about that every quarter. I don't
Right.
think they read them. I think they're just like, oh, that family is doing what they're supposed to do. So if they're on top of this, they're probably on top of
Right.
providing an education for their
Right.
kid. And so if you fail to do that, that's like, okay, they're not even paying attention to what we're asking. Let's go see if
Right.
this kid is getting beaten. But yeah, they're jumping in New Jersey from 0 to 60, where like we're not
Oh,
even
yeah.
giving you the, the time to
Well,
send the report. We're just going to assume you're beating your kid.
right. I will say, I did attend I think it was like a little open air event or something like that with HSLDA,
Okay.
Homeschool Legal Defense Association. We're talking to some of the attorneys there, and they did tell us that these bills were brought on by one single abuse case, like in all of the other cases across the country. There's this one single case that they can't always prove that it was a homeschooling family. but it's like what you were saying. There's this picture they paint of this family that is, out there in the woods somewhere or whatever, like away from society, I don't know, abusing their kid, neglecting them, not feeding them, not taking care of them, emotional neglect, and all this other stuff. There was a child that had been emotionally, I believe, neglected, physically, like they weren't eating, they were malnourished, and this story became a big deal, and that led to the bills being proposed, just like that. One
Mm,
story. And to my knowledge, the number of homeschoolers who've been involved with DIFUS or CPS across the nation, it's a negligible amount. It's like less than like 0.1%. It's such a small amount. And so this is what they do. In 2004, there was one incidents of child abuse with a family that claimed that they were homeschooling. And that's why they attempted the overreach then. But I guess they didn't get enough votes. And so now they're doing it again. One single case. That one single case is supposed to be probable cause to inspect every single homeschool family and the way that they're caring for their kids. It's not a trend, it's not conclusive. It's nothing essentially, but they're just using this one case to punish the 99% that are doing right by their kids.
yeah.
It's overreach and proportional levels that I can't even describe. It's just, how do you go from, like you said, how do you go from nothing, having no oversight, and kids are performing well?
Yeah.
Kids are performing well academically, emotionally, socially. They're doing better than their peers in traditional schools for 58 years.
Yeah.
But now,
And
because another case popped up,
I'd love to see a study about, comparing how many kids in school that are abused and nothing is done about it by their parents, how many kids in school are bullied or commit suicide or even are victims of school shootings. And yet we're supposed to be the ones that are on the stand and have to prove ourselves, because this is how families are supposed to have lived since the beginning of time. You're educated by your home, your family, and your community, your loved
absolutely.
ones, people that know you. And it is a silly concept when you think about it. Like, I'm just going to drop my little kid off. I have a 7-year-old son as well. Can't imagine just dropping him off to somebody that I don't know.
Don't know.
99% chance they do not align with my values. And yeah, they're just going to be with them for most of the week. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely nuts when you think about it. I mean, my husband and I, we both grew up in households where our parents worked,
Yeah, me too.
and we went to daycare, and we went, it was somebody watching us. A lot of times it could have been a relative usually. But if it wasn't, it was somebody that they felt like they knew really well. And then we went right into public school. We started out in private school. Like the first couple of years, we both did public school. I did the magnet school. And when we weren't in school, somebody else was watching us. Somebody else was, just, supervising us until our parents got home, until we were old enough to be latchkey kids. And then you go home by yourself. But it's funny, someone asked me before, I got this actually a couple of times in the beginning of my homeschool journey. Um, they said, um, don't you feel like it's like that there's something wrong, with not having the village, like you said earlier. Are you sheltering your kids? You can't keep them sheltered forever. How long are you going to shelter them? Like, at what point are you going to send them? And I'm like, why should there ever be a point when I have to send them anywhere? Why? Because I think ideally, if things were different and we were, more close as a family, if families were more interconnected, because they're just so broken, right? If families were more interconnected like they were years ago, there would really be no need to send a child anywhere, because they could stay home as long as needed, and the family support system was there, and grandma and grandpa, there were all these supports to help you, so they didn't have to necessarily go anywhere. But now it's almost like there's no other option, and I've had people ask me that plenty of times, like, why are you trying to shelter your kids? Or they'll come up with the argument that people who homeschool are doing it intentionally so that they can shelter their kids from the rest of the world. And then those homeschool kids are going to grow up weird, right? And they're going to grow up with this like very narrow view of the world, and they're going to be unable to socialize with everybody else, I guess, when they enter the real world, because their parents have sheltered them. And it could be farther from the truth. Personally, like, we teach our kids We teach our kids our faith. That's first and foremost in our house. So they learn about the Bible and they learn the truth, but we also teach them to be discerning, and they ask lots of questions. They're not being indoctrinated. They ask tons of questions. We want them to have a faith that is rooted in, grounded in truth and in evidence. And for us, we believe that there is evidence that Jesus was the Son of God, is the Son of God, that he died and was resurrected from the dead, and that he lives. Thousands of people saw him on the earth. Like, we teach our kids our faith, but we also teach them about the basic tenets of other beliefs and practices, but we do it from a biblical worldview so that our kids know when they encounter someone who says, well, hey, I believe in secular humanism, or, I believe that, there's moral relativism, and, like, there is no absolute truth or whatever, that they know, even at the age of 5 and 7, how to deal with those arguments when they come across. So, like, we teach our kids, their foundational faith and their beliefs, and we teach them about different views. We want them to see different cultures, but we don't want someone else to tell them, the story of someone else's culture from a single lens view. We want them to see authentic culture. If I'm going to teach my kids, about other people's cultures and their ways of life, well, let's dig in and like act like we go, like we're living in Chile or we're going to Africa and we're going to take a trip there, and let's see the stories and hear the stories from the people that live there, not from a textbook where someone's telling you, their narrow, view of this person's history. Like right now, we're getting ready to go into a study about New Jersey and the Native Americans that lived here, and looking into BIPOC literature, Black, Indigenous, people of color, books, picture books by people who wrote these stories, because these are stories passed down from their family and their heritage, oral history, things like that, and again, helping them to like learn how to be compassionate and empathetic to other people, and learning like things that they don't teach in school anymore, like empathy and compassion. There's just certain things that they don't teach in life skills. And there's so many things we want to teach our kids, and we want to do it, for us, we want to do it from a biblical worldview. And that was pretty much the primary reason why we started homeschooling, outside of trying to protect our kids physically from vaccines and anything else that we weren't really sure about was, if it was going to be good for them. We wanted them to learn about the world from a biblical worldview, but that doesn't mean that they are going to be, biased, and or that they're going to be unkind, to other people because they were raised differently. We actually feel like we're exposing them to way more than they would, be exposed to in the schools, but from a positive and a holistic and, view, and from a loving family, and in a safe environment. These are all things that really matter to us. I think it matters to most homeschoolers, which is why it seems almost ridiculous to think that a person that would go out of their way to take their kids out of the system, to bring them into a loving, warm environment, to do all of this, to make all these sacrifices, to give them a good childhood, a real education, a living education, and a warm home and a loving environment. Why would they go through all of that just to abuse their kid?
You're right.
Why are they
Yes.
doing all of that?
Yes.
It makes no sense.
And I love what you said too. It sparked kind of a conversation I had today with my 7-year-old son in the car. One of the stations that I was just kind of flipping through was our K-Love, and it's, the religious music channel, and we don't listen to it a lot, but the song was catchy and I kind of had it on, and my daughter started
Okay.
like pretending she was singing to it, and it was so cute. It brought me back to a conversation that my son had said to me before one of our play groups that we go to. He came home one day and he said, "Mom, so-and-so doesn't believe in God." And we're not like, we don't like go to church every week. We've gone to church before. We've read children's Bibles and stuff together. We pray together every night. But as far as like, we haven't gone over, it's not part of our, I guess, like, it's just kind of in our daily routine to like pray together. And it's mostly to, let's thank God for everything that we have. So
Okay.
it was interesting that he was like, Soren doesn't, I don't know, I said the kid's name, whatever. But he doesn't believe in God. And it was a really cool opportunity for me to talk to him about, okay, his family might not, and not everybody
Right.
does. And this is why, we can. And, I was kind of explaining to him today as I turned on the K-Love channel. And,
Mhm.
I said to him, like, yeah, not everybody does believe in that, but there's a lot of things in the world that not everybody believes in. But
Right.
my job is to expose you to it all. And as you grow up and become a man, you will pick and choose what seems right for you. And, it got us into this really cool conversation just driving in the car about how, like, really what and I actually explained that to him, the resurrection, and I said, that's why people celebrate Good Friday, and isn't that a weird term for it? Because there's nothing good about it. Jesus was,
Right.
murdered on this day, and then 3 days later he rose again. And I said, there are people that saw it, and then there are other people that say, no, you were lying. And so I
Right.
said, but there are also historians that cannot disprove it either, and that's very interesting because
Exactly.
I went to catechism growing up and made my confirmation in the Roman Catholic Church, and nobody ever explained any of that to me. A really cool book and movie is The Case for Christ, where,
For Christ. Yes.
atheist goes in to try to disprove the resurrection. That was super
Right.
interesting. It was
It
just so
was.
cool to have this conversation with my son. I'm like, if he were in school and I was at a cubicle right now, we would not be having this conversation, this
No.
connection. It was just cool that I was like, not even pushing anything on him. I was just like, you know what? All we need to know is that somebody created this for us to be here, and we're here to learn, and we're going to make mistakes, but there's forgiveness. And the best thing you can do is service to others. And that is just that's the message. And I just loved that I could have that conversation with my son, because it
Yeah.
never would have happened if I were in a cubicle and he was in his classroom and we were
Right.
rushing around to soccer practice after school and then
That's
rushing to
true.
daycare, rushing to this place, or even rushing to put dinner on the table, or God forbid, eating
Exactly.
McDonald's. Those kinds of conversations are just so cool to have. And it's just planting little seeds in them, and we can discover it together.
Absolutely.
And that's my thing too. I'm like, I don't know all about it, but we're going to discover it together as part of your homeschool. We're going to be on this journey together. And what do we believe? And why are we here? What is our purpose? And like,
That's
that's
awesome.
exciting.
It is. It really is exciting. And I think one of the other things, that when I get that question about, well, what are you afraid of that you're trying to shelter your kids from, or what are you so afraid of? Like I've had people say that to me, like the school, it's good enough for, it's good enough for my kids. So like, and what are you afraid of? Or I had another mother, I literally just met a mother down the block. She just lives down the block here. She just moved in the neighborhood, and she goes, the schools in this district are excellent. They're so good. You haven't even tried them, not once. They even give moms a break. We get a break from the kids. And I said very matter of factly, the school system has absolutely nothing that I want. Nothing that I want for my kids. And I didn't get into a whole debate or anything, but she was so shocked. You should have seen the look on her face. It was like, what? Because she, like a lot of people, and I've been approached by many people over the years, they have many of them have the same, view of the system. It's like, this is a good place. If you can move to a place where there's an excellent district, that's everything. You've got to move. Whenever you're thinking about move, you got to move to the right place. So the best schools are Ribbon School District, this and that, as long as you have the best school district. And it's like, okay, even if you found what you think is the best school district, there's going to still be something that you're going to need to shelter your kids from, especially when they're younger. I think older kids can probably fend for themselves when they have a good foundation. But when you have young kids like we do, for me, you might call it sheltering. You might say that we're trying to be overly protective, but really I see it as a bold way of living.
Mm.
It's not about sheltering them from everything. It's about sheltering them from the things that are harmful to them, right? That they really are not in a place at this young age to mentally handle until they're older. A lot of the
Have
things that we talk, like I have time to talk to my kids about a lot of things. Like you said, conversations that would never have happened if I was working full time outside the home. And when I have these conversations and I listen to my kids talking, now they're 5 and 7, but they have the comprehension level of a third grader. When I have conversations with my kids, I think, well, what if they were in this environment? They wouldn't be able to have a healthy conversation with somebody who is responsible, that because I don't believe every teacher is responsible, someone that really has their best interests at heart, and someone really, really cares about educating them and them growing and learning. What if there's an opportunity, in this school system, and they're there and they're using this opportunity to have this conversation with them that I should be having with them to steer them in a certain direction. And I know that you've heard about this, because and I've heard about it so many times. I know you have had to hear about it, about the stories about kids that are being socially transitioned in schools without their parents' knowledge.
Yeah.
all the time, and lawsuits that are happening because parents are like, wait a second, I didn't know you were socially transitioning my kid. When did you have time to have conversations with your kid? Well, you were at work. You were at
Mhm.
work all day. And so they were talking to their guidance counselor, or they were talking to their teacher, or they were talking to whoever, their club leader or somebody that's been helping them socially transition for a year now, and you didn't know anything about it. That's harmful.
Oh, yeah.
That's harmful. And so, for me, it's no, I'm not. You might look at it shelter. I'm sheltering and overprotective, call it what you want, but I am a mama bear, and I am going to do what is necessary to cover my children from things that are harmful while exposing to them to things that are good for them. It's my job as a mother to know what's good and what's dangerous, how to expose you to the good, the beautiful, the pure, the things that are going to be helpful to you as you grow and keep you from the dangerous stuff until you're ready to handle it on your own. That's our right as parents
Yeah.
to do that. But I get it all the time. And I think it comes from a place from most parents feel like, well, it's good enough for my kids. So why isn't it good enough for your kids?
Yeah.
Like,
And I
what?
think they've
That's
never thought twice about it, and that's why.
right.
Like, I just, went to college. I didn't think twice about it. It was just, well, that's what you did if you didn't want to be a loser. And then you just go get a job because you're applying to jobs. And this one interviewed me and this one offered the job. It's not like, oh, that was my dream. And then, 16 years later, you're like, what have I been
What
doing for my
for
whole
my whole
adult life?
life? Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't
Right.
think about it, you just send the kids to school, and that's how I always thought I would too, and it was during COVID for me as well when I realized, "Oh, I don't even have control over my children when they're in school," and we were just in a private daycare. My son was in daycare and I was working.
Wow.
And they said, we have to start masking 3-year-olds because in New York, Cuomo was going to mask 3-year-olds. And I
I
was like,
remember
well,
that.
you're an in-home daycare. They said, well, we still follow the rules and we get
Okay.
audited by the state. So if they walk in and your kid is 3 and he's not masked, we would get cited. And I was like, well, then I really have no control over my child. If I don't have control over him in an in-home daycare, there's no way I have control. They're going to be putting masks on them in school, hand sanitizer. They're going to be feeding
All
them
of that.
crap. They're going to be injecting them with God knows what because they're going to say that that's the good for the good of all, right? That's where all
Right.
of this is headed for the good of all. So toxic.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely that's how we feel. And I don't know when I really don't know when we as parents stopped wanting to protect our kids. I don't know if it's because many of us have been indoctrinated by the school system to think that this is what's best. I know a
Mm.
lot of immigrants feel that way. I've spoken to a lot of immigrant families who say like, well, the education system in America is the best. And I'm like, maybe in the 1800s, but not now. But that's what they think. When I come over here, that's the first thing I'm going to do everything I can to get my child in the best schools so that they can go to college. And they feel like this is the way out to financial freedom, or whatever. And then a lot of parents here, like you said, they don't, like most of the parents I talk to, they don't even question it. um, and it's amazing to me how they won't question the system, but they will question me. They have 20 million questions for me all day every day, but they don't question the system. They don't
Oh my God,
question
that's the
them. And I'm
best
saying,
line I've heard.
yeah, I'm saying, wait, you're not worried at all about what's going on in there? Like, does it never cross your mind to ask them like at least three questions? Because I'm pretty sure if you start asking questions, one mom I met recently, she came here from Hawaii. She had her daughter, it was like fourth or fifth grade, and she was in a private school all up until this point. And she said she just sent her to one of the public schools here in New Jersey last year, and she simply asked a question. One question: what is in your curriculum? They said, ma'am, that's confidential. I said, welcome to New Jersey.
You've got to be kidding. It's
Welcome to New
confidential.
Jersey. It's
We
confidential.
pay the
And she said,
taxes. We pay the taxes, and there
yeah,
are flesh and blood that you're teaching it to.
that's what she got. So she went into it. She asked them more and more questions, and they were livid. Who is this woman asking us questions? How dare she? This is confidential. And I was like, I'm so glad that you asked all these questions. Where did it lead to? And she said, well, ultimately they did have to, at some point have a sit down and talk with me. But they made a really big deal out of it. She wasn't happy. Her daughter also, through the whole process of this, was, being mistreated by the teachers that were being interrogated. And so they were taking out their frustrations on her daughter. She just pulled her out, and I think she put her somewhere else. But it was just the fact that they said to her, it is confidential. And I said, this is, if you could not see before, I hope that you can see now that there is an agenda. There's an agenda to keep parents in the dark about their kids, right? If you're the system that's, you're all caring about the children and what's best for the children, what's best for their future. The children are our future. The parents are the ones that are responsible for them. And if you're keeping them in the dark about what's in the curriculum, then what else are you keeping in the dark about?
Absolutely.
But you want to ask me 100 million questions at an annual health and wellness check, and also an annual meeting with an licensed evaluator from the state who's going to evaluate my child's portfolio at the end of the year. This is also part of the bill. Who's going to evaluate the portfolio and then has to send it to a superintendent of the district to approve it, and that person has the power to disapprove it as well, disapprove of it. And so that could bring you all the way back to square one. It's almost like you did nothing for the year.
Wow.
And I said, this is something. You're keeping parents in the dark. You're not educating kids. You're socially transitioning kids without their parents' knowledge. Most New Jersey kids, most of them last year, ELA, English language arts, 52% of them passed, met or exceeded standards, which means almost half of the kids failed. 39% math.
This is in the
met
school.
in the states, in the public schools in New Jersey. 39% last year passed math. It met or exceeded the math standards, 39%, which means that more than half of them failed, right? Science was even low. It was like 24%. So they're not educating the kids. Those levels are where they are now. Pre-pandemic levels were just slightly higher. So you're not educating the kids. No one's proficient in writing and reading, math, the basics. But you're socially transitioning kids, and you're keeping parents in the dark. And they get a physical and a vaccination at the beginning of the year, and you're done with them. But you want to come into my home to see how I care for my kids without any probable cause. You want to meet with my child, to meet with some state representative, whoever,
Yeah.
for
Someone
a
that passed a
general health and
test, and
wellness.
that's where they are.
Yeah.
So, all right, when are these bills getting voted on, and what can people in other states do to keep an eye on it to see if it's coming to them? Like, where do we find this information?
So I always direct people to HSLDA because I feel like they make it so much easier to find. You could go to the New Jersey legislature, you could Google, like the state of homeschool laws in New Jersey, but you're not going to find anything. HSLDA, you don't have to be a member. You could just follow them on Instagram or YouTube. I like their Instagram channel because they just updated it today. They update it often. You can also follow my page because I'm always talking about it. And what I like about HSLDA is that they will, once you're part of their, I think it's their mailing list, they will send you an email with live updates of what's going on. And then they'll tell you what you can do. And today they dropped an update stating that these bills are basically like, they're kind of in limbo. They're just kind of holding like in a holding pattern. Before the summer recess, they just couldn't get to them. They could barely get to the bills that they had. So now they're kind of like holding them in like it's like in a standstill until the gubernatorial election, right? So that's a big deal in New Jersey. There's a Republican candidate that is very much for, limited or no restrictions on homeschoolers. And then you have a Democratic candidate who's obviously of the other mindset. And so until that election takes place, I think in November, we're probably not going to see anything happen. Today, they also mentioned that Senator Paul Moriarty said on different news outlets that he is planning to unleash some more bills this fall. And I guess they're waiting for the gubernatorial election, and then they'll proceed with those. So we're looking probably at like November, between November and December. We're looking at some. I'm just hoping and praying that these bills don't get enough votes to pass.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there'll be a repeat of 2004 because this is overreach. This is like beyond. I mean, filing a letter of intent and submitting a letter annually. Okay, I think a lot of people would be open to doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't seem too bad. But once you give them a foothold in, they come and they take over.
Yeah.
And, now they're trying to flood us with more bills. And it's very disheartening, but at the same time, it's also keeping me on my toes. So that's why I stay on HSLDA's page. I follow them on Instagram. Get their newsletters. Moms can follow me as well on Instagram at Godly Mothers Chosen Littles. And I'm always sharing it in stories or a feed because it's something that's very dear to me because I'm here in this state. And one of the reasons why we moved here was because it was one of the 12 free states. If it's no longer free, now we're looking at potentially other states enforcing similar laws. I know in Illinois a few months ago, they were trying to make it almost criminalize parents who didn't file their letter of intent on time. They were going to go to jail.
Yeah.
But HSLDA fought against that bill and they were able to get that thrown out. But they are coming at us hard. And it's just proving to me more and more that we are effective in what we're doing, empowering our kids, educating our kids, empowering them with the truth. And we are raising up a generation of critical thinkers. And so this is a problem. This is a problem, like you said, because who is going to be there to be their factory workers and their cubicle workers, and who's going to be there, in the future. So they're coming at us hard, and we're just, praying and just trying to stay positive.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I will put the link to hslda.org in the show notes. I direct people there as well. And my membership just ran out because I think my credit card was like at the end of the expiration date, and I have to renew it because they do so much work. And you can even use their
Yes.
templates to file your reports if you're in one of the states that has to do that. So I always make sure to file on HSLDA templates, and then the school really doesn't bother me because they know I have legal defense backing me, but they are there for
Yes.
so much. So if you can donate to and become a member, I think it was like $100 for the whole year to be a
Yeah.
member of
It's really
HSLD.
inexpensive.
So I got to go back on and do that because they do such good work. But like you said, you don't even have to be a member to get all of this
No.
information. It's so important that we stay
Yes.
on top of it because they're banking on our ignorance, and we can't be
That's it.
homeschooling our kids to keep them on top of things and then not keep on top of it ourselves. That's like our one job. We have to be on these laws, and I'm not good at it myself, but that's why I love having people like you on to give us that push and like show us how easy it is just to like, hey, read their
Oh, yeah.
Instagram page and this is how you'll know what's coming down the pipeline.
Yes.
So important. So thank you. And I'm going to put your Instagram in the show notes as well because you kind of just like put it in a way that's easy to understand. We don't have to read a whole article. You've read it and
Right.
you've interpreted it into layman's terms and it makes sense. And thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. And parents, I also wanted to say something that I think sometimes, parents may not realize is really, really powerful is your voice, your story. Get on social media, talk about your homeschool story. What caused you to start homeschooling? What you're doing right now, the Homeschool How To podcast is very powerful because when people hear the stories of other people, they're like, wait, that's like a regular person just like me. Like they did that, I can do that because a lot of people have misconceptions about homeschoolers. They think most of us are elite and wealthy and highly educated. Go
Yeah.
figure. They think that it's just for, like you said, the privilege and the people that have connections and support and all these resources. And the reality is, it's just everyday American mothers and fathers that have a burning passion and desire to raise their kids in truth. They want their kids to be liberated. They want their kids to know, to be empowered with truth. They want their kids to have a real childhood. They want their kids to, be truly educated. And that's regardless of socioeconomic background. So I think it's so important when parents tell their story, get on social media and tell your story. Talk to friends and family because they don't know what's going on. A lot of the homeschool parents that have been following my page in New Jersey said they didn't even know. They didn't even know what was happening.
Wow.
I said, follow HSLDA, and then you can follow my channel. Get out there and share your story and tell people why you started homeschooling. And believe it or not, that's how other people are inspired to homeschool because they see stories like that. People are always on social media and YouTube. People are on their phone all the time. They might not look up to have a conversation, but they're online. They're
Yeah.
on their phone and they're going to look at clips like that and say, you know what, I can probably do that too. Or maybe I need to start thinking about that when I come across your content and I see, the content that you make. It sparks debate. It sparks conversation. It gets people thinking like, wait a second, maybe I should be questioning everything. Maybe I shouldn't just believe whatever I'm hearing from the government and from the school systems. Maybe the experts really don't know it all, and so you start questioning everything and then you go down the rabbit hole. And then you end up doing what we're doing. But it's such a blessing. I'm so grateful that you asked me to be on to talk about this. I'm grateful that you took the opportunity, you saw the opportunity, that not only to like just give me an opportunity to talk about this, but also you saw it as an opportunity to educate others. Because like you said, when one act of infringement on parental rights or homeschoolers' rights happens in one state, it just is a matter of time before it trickles on over to other states.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Mariama, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you'll come back on again and update us on laws, what did pass, what didn't, and what we can do in the future, because it's always going to be like a baseball game. They're going to be throwing pitches at us and we have to try
Always.
to hit them out of the park.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much
so
for
much.
having me.
Absolutely.
All
Thank you for
right.
being here.